They wheeled him into the emergency room on a stretcher, barely breathing, blood soaking through his hospital gown, and I stood right there, clutching the divorce papers in my purse. His eyes searched the ceiling, then landed on me. "Why?" he whispered, his lips trembling. "You promised you'd wait for me." And I couldn't even answer. Because how do you tell a man who gave you his kidney to save your life, that while he was in surgery, you married someone else? I never thought I'd become the villain of my own love story. But I did. And I have to live with it every single day of my life. My name is Barbara Mitchell. I'm 80 years old now. A retired nurse. Blonde hair, though most of it is gray now. I live alone in a small cottage in Vermont, surrounded by the scent of pine trees and a silence that screams louder than any siren. I don't have many friends anymore. Most of them are gone, passed on, moved away, or never forgave me. But I remember everything, every tear, every smile, every betrayal, especially the one I caused. It started back in 1971. I was 26, just out of nursing school. I was full of dreams, full of life, and in love with a man who made me feel like the only woman in the world. His name was Thomas Walker. Tall, broad shoulders, chestnut hair, deep blue eyes, and a crooked smile that made my heart dance. He worked in construction, always had oil on his jeans and dust in his hair. But he was kind, soft-spoken, and when he looked at me, I felt seen. He was the kind of man who fixed your roof and your heart on the same day. We met at a local diner where I worked part-time on weekends. He came in for pancakes and left with my number. We started dating right away. Long walks by the lake, holding hands at county fairs, whispering secrets under moonlight. The kind of love you read about in library books with worn covers and faded pages. By 1973, we were engaged. I thought life was perfect. Until it wasn't. That summer, I collapsed at work. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion. But after a round of tests, the doctors gave me the news that shattered everything. Kidney failure. Stage 4. My body was shutting down. Fast. I was too young, too healthy-looking, but my kidneys didn't care. Dialysis began. 3 times a week. Painful, exhausting, lonely. Thomas never left my side. He sat beside me during every session, holding my hand while I cried. "You're gonna be okay, Barbie," he'd whisper, brushing my hair from my forehead. "We're gonna get through this." I hated that nickname, Barbie, but from his lips, it sounded like poetry. Then came the test results. He was a match. Thomas offered me his kidney without even blinking. "Are you insane?" I shouted, tears running down my face. "I'd give you both if I could," he said, calm as ever. "You're my future, Barbie." The transplant was scheduled for February 5, 1974. I was terrified, grateful, hopeful. But while I was healing, something changed. It started with a knock on my hospital room door. A man stepped in. We'll call him James. He was a doctor. Sharp suit, Ivy League charm. A specialist who'd been consulting on my case. Clean-shaven, confident, and very interested in me. "Barbara," he said, smiling, "you're stronger than most women I've treated." It's inspiring. I was flattered. I was weak. I was lonely. And worst of all, I was curious. When I got discharged, Thomas was still recovering in the ICU. He couldn't speak much, couldn't walk yet. But I did. And I walked straight into James's car. We went for coffee. Then lunch. Then more. I told myself it was harmless, that it didn't mean anything, that Thomas would understand. But one day turned into 1 week, and one kiss turned into a whirlwind. James made me feel like a woman again. Not a patient. Not a burden. Just alive. 3 months after my surgery, Thomas was still home recovering. But I was standing at the courthouse, in a white suit, marrying James. And that same day, Thomas collapsed at home. His stitches had torn. Internal bleeding. His sister called me in panic. I rushed to the hospital, still in my wedding clothes. And when I got there, he looked straight at me, bloody, pale, betrayed. Why? He asked, voice cracking. But before I could answer, the monitors beeped faster. Nurses swarmed in. Doctors shouted. And I stood frozen, divorce papers in my purse, vows still fresh on my lips, while the man who saved my life slipped away. The sound of the heart monitor flatlining pierced through my soul. Beep. Doctors and nurses rushed around Thomas, their voices sharp and fast. Code blue. Charge to 200. I stood there like a ghost, still in my white wedding heels. My bouquet was in the car. My lipstick is still fresh. And the man I'd promised to grow old with? He was dying because I broke his heart. I didn't even notice I was crying until one of the nurses shoved me out of the room. Ma'am, you need to wait outside. I wanted to scream, to beg, to reverse time. Instead, I sat on the cold hallway bench, knees trembling, my hands stained with the regret of a decision that had just ruined everything. The double doors swung open. A young nurse with shaking lips and red eyes walked out. He's alive, she whispered. But barely. They kept Thomas in the ICU for 4 more weeks. I wasn't allowed in. His sister, Marcia, told the hospital I was no longer family. She told me to stay away, that I had no right to be there, that I had chosen someone else. And she was right. James told me not to feel guilty. He's a grown man, Barbara. He made his decision to donate that kidney. That doesn't mean he owns your life. But James didn't understand. Because that kidney wasn't just an organ. It was love. It was a sacrifice. It was Thomas saying, I choose you, even if it kills me. A month after Thomas got discharged, I tried to visit him at his small ranch house upstate. He didn't answer the door. I left a letter. No reply. I sent flowers. They came back in the mail, returned to the sender. I even tried calling the landline. Marcia answered. Her voice was like ice. He almost died, Barbara. He doesn't want to see you. He doesn't even want to hear your name. Then she said something I'll never forget. You killed the man who gave you life. But I have a new life now. James and I moved to Connecticut. He worked at the hospital. I stayed home and eventually opened a small floral shop. Everyone thought we were the perfect couple. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Thomas. I saw the way his fingers squeezed mine during dialysis. The way his eyes looked at me, really looked at me, when I was too weak to stand. The way he whispered, "You're my future," when he signed the transplant consent papers. James could never give me that kind of love. Because James didn't sacrifice for me. He didn't suffer with me. He didn't bleed for me. One snowy evening in 1980, 6 years later, I saw Thomas again. I was at a small holiday fundraiser in Vermont. James had to stay behind for work, so I went alone. The place was packed with red and green decorations, choirs singing carols, families sipping cocoa. I was chatting with a woman about orchids when I heard a voice behind me. Still love lilies more than roses? I froze. I knew that voice. I turned around slowly, and there he was. Thomas. Older, thinner, with a cane now, but still handsome in that rugged, dust-of-the-earth way. His eyes met mine. I wanted to cry. I wanted to run.
Instead, I whispered, "Hi."
He nodded. "Hi." There was a long pause. The world felt quiet, as if every snowflake stopped falling just to listen. Then he said, "You look healthy." I nodded slowly.
"Because of you."
Another pause.
"I almost died, Barbara." "I know."
"You married him the same day I was bleeding in a hospital bed." I looked down.
"I know."
He took a deep breath. "Why did you do it?"
I looked up at him, finally meeting his eyes.
And I said the truth.
Because I was scared.
That was the last thing I said before someone bumped into me, spilling hot cocoa on my coat. When I turned back around, Thomas was gone. That night, I told James the first needed space. I packed a small bag, told him I was visiting my sister in Maine, and drove straight to the old ranch house where Thomas used to live. But when I got there, the place was boarded up. Overgrown weeds, broken porch swing, for sale, sign half fallen in the snow. I asked a neighbor. She said he moved out years ago. "Don't know where he went," the woman said. "But he used to get letters from a hospital. Probably dealing with all that transplant stuff.
Poor soul never looked the same after you left."
That was the first time I realized, maybe Thomas never healed. Not from the surgery. Not from the betrayal. Not from me. I tried writing again. Dozens of letters. I even hired a private investigator to find him. Nothing. He vanished. Like I had never existed. Years passed. James and I divorced. No kids. No legacy. Just silence. My flower shop burned down in '98. I moved to Vermont permanently, bought a small cottage in the woods, and began volunteering at a local hospice. Because if I couldn't be forgiven, at least I could care for others. But no matter how many lives I touched, I could never forgive myself. Then something happened last month. I got a call. A voice said, "Are you Barbara Mitchell?" I said yes. The woman paused, then said, "I think you should come to Riverstone Hospice. We have a patient named Thomas Walker.
He asked for you."
My hand trembled as I held the phone to my ear. "Thomas Walker," I repeated.
"Yes, ma'am," the voice said gently.
"He arrived last night. He asked if we could find you. Said your name was the only one that mattered." My heart felt like it stopped. I hadn't heard his voice in over 40 years. I didn't even know if he was alive. And now, out of nowhere, he was back, and asking for me. "When can I come?" I whispered. The nurse paused. "Soon. He doesn't have much time." The drive to Riverstone Hospice was only 2 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. I clutched the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My thoughts were racing faster than the car. What would I say? What could I say? He gave me his kidney, and I gave him a betrayal so deep it nearly ended his life, and mine. I pulled into the hospice parking lot, my breath caught in my chest. The building was quiet. A small white facility tucked between pine trees, with wind chimes gently singing outside the windows. It was the kind of place where people came to say goodbye. A nurse met me at the front desk. Her name was Claire. She gave me a sad smile, then said, "He hasn't spoken much, but when he saw your name on the clipboard, he smiled for the first time." I bit my lip. "Is he dying?" She looked down. "Stage 4 liver cancer. It's spread to his bones. We're just keeping him comfortable now." Tears welled in my eyes.
"He's down the hall," Claire added.
"Room 7. You can go in. He's awake." I walked slowly toward room 7. Each step felt like I was sinking into the past. The door was slightly open. I pushed it gently, And there he was. Thomas. His hair was gray now, wispy and thin. His cheeks had sunk in. His skin was pale and spotted, and his frame was barely a shadow of the strong man I once knew. But his eyes, those blue eyes were the same. Soft, sad, and full of something I didn't deserve. He turned his head slightly. Barbie. My breath hitched. I haven't heard that name in decades, I whispered. He smiled weakly. I knew you'd come. I sat beside his bed, took his frail hand in mine, and felt the warmth I thought I'd lost forever. I didn't know you were alive, I said softly. I wasn't. Not really, he murmured. Not after what happened. I swallowed hard. I don't deserve to be here. Maybe not, he said, his voice hoarse. But you are. There was a long silence. Then he said the one thing I never expected. I forgave you a long time ago, Barbie. I broke down. Tears fell freely, and I buried my face in his blanket. I ruined everything, Thomas. I was weak. I was selfish. You almost died, and I didn't even stay. He reached up with a shaky hand and touched my shoulder. I know, he said simply. I hated you for a long time, but hating you didn't heal me. I looked up. Why didn't you ever write back? He stared at the ceiling. Because I wanted to forget. I thought if I erased you, the pain would go too. But it didn't. It just sat there, like a stone in my chest. He turned to me, eyes watery, until I got sick. And I started remembering everything. The good, the bad, the love. I held his hand tighter. You saved my life, Thomas. He smiled faintly. And you gave it back to me today. We talked for hours. About everything. The past. The silence. The mistakes. The love that never really died. Just before sunset, he closed his eyes. Barbie. Yes. Can you do one thing for me? Anything. Stay. I stayed. That night, I sat beside his bed, holding his hand until the moon rose over the pine trees. We didn't speak much after that, but we didn't need to. Some love doesn't need words. Just presence. The next morning, Nurse Claire brought in breakfast, but Thomas didn't wake up. His breath was shallow. His skin was cooler. He's slipping, she whispered. I leaned close to him. Thomas. It's okay. I'm here. I won't leave again. A small smile curled on his lips. Then, he whispered, I'm glad it was you, and closed his eyes. The monitor slowed. Beep, beep, beep. Then silence. Thomas Walker was gone. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, holding his hand. Because for the first time in 46 years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, by his side. Later that day, the nurse gave me a small box. He wanted you to have this, she said. Inside was a letter, and an old photograph of us, me and Thomas, at the county fair. Laughing, young, full of dreams. I opened the letter, and as I read the first line, my heart nearly stopped. Dear Barbie, if you're reading this, I've already said goodbye. But I need you to know something. I held the letter with both hands, my fingers trembling. The edges of the paper were worn, yellowed slightly, as if he'd been carrying it around for years, waiting for the right time. My eyes blurred with tears as I began to read. Dear Barbie, if you're reading this, I've already said goodbye. But I need you to know something. I never hated you. I said I did. I told myself I did. But I didn't. I loved you too much to hold on to that kind of anger. I paused and wiped my eyes. I could hear his voice in every word, gentle, honest, like he was sitting right there again, holding my hand. When you left, it broke me, not because I lost you, but because I realized I wasn't enough to make you stay. I kept thinking, I gave her my kidney. Why wasn't that enough? But the truth is, love isn't about what we give. It's about what we understand. And maybe I never understood the fear you carried. Or loneliness. Maybe I made you feel like you had to be strong all the time, when all you wanted was to feel safe. But real love, it forgives. My hands covered my mouth as the sobs came out. He had forgiven me, not with just his words, but with his heart. I sat in the hospice room for hours, rereading the letter over and over. Later, Nurse Claire came in with a small journal.
"He used to write in this," she said.
"We thought you might want it." I opened it carefully. Page after page filled with sketches of me. My eyes, my smile, my hair from the 70s. He had drawn me. Next to one drawing were 4 simple words.
"I still choose her."
That night, I walked out of Riverstone Hospice under a sky full of stars. I looked up and whispered, "Thank you, Thomas." I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove for 5 hours until I reached a tiny, run-down piece of land by the lakeside. Thomas's old ranch. It had been abandoned for years, but somehow the land still felt like him. I got out of the car and stepped onto the porch. Even though it was falling apart, I could still see the 2 of us dancing here, barefoot and laughing, back when life was simple. I sat on the porch swing, the same one that creaked every time he kissed me, and held the letter to my chest. "I'm sorry," I whispered.
"I should have stayed."
The wind rustled the trees like a soft answer. And for a moment, I felt warm, like he was still there. In the days that followed, I decided to buy the ranch. The seller said nobody wanted it. Said it was too far from town. Too quiet. But that's exactly what I needed. A place to remember. A place to forgive myself. I started fixing it up. Slowly. One window at a time. One floorboard at a time. With every nail I hammered, I whispered his name. With every paint stroke, I told him a story. I wasn't trying to erase the past. I was finally learning to live with it. Then, one morning, while clearing out the attic, I found a small metal box hidden under an old trunk. Inside, letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to me. But never sent. I sat down on the floor, surrounded by dust and silence, and opened the first one. "Barbie, I saw your wedding in the newspaper. You looked beautiful." I tried to tear it up. I couldn't. My chest tightened. Every letter carried a piece of his heartbreak. Every word soaked in the pain I caused. "Barbie, I saw you in town today. You were holding his hand. I wanted to walk up to you, but I turned away. You looked happy. I hope you were."
And then,
one letter hit me the hardest. "Barbie, I miss your voice. I still say your name in my sleep. Sometimes, I wake up and think you're still next to me. But it's just my pillow." I covered my mouth, trying not to scream. I had broken a man so deeply. Yet he never stopped writing. Never stopped remembering. Never stopped loving. The last letter in the box wasn't dated. But it was sealed in a small envelope with my name, written in shaky handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a tiny gold necklace. A heart. Inside the locket was a photo of us, at the lake, laughing. And folded beneath it, a note that simply read, "Even if you never come back,
you'll always be the part of me I never stopped carrying."
I sat there, crying into the floor, my knees curled to my chest. Because I had spent decades running from the pain, and he had spent decades carrying me through it. I wore the necklace every day after that. The tiny gold heart never left my skin, not when I showered, not when I gardened, not even when I slept. It felt like a small second chance, not with Thomas, but with myself. The ranch became my healing place. I patched up the broken roof, painted the porch blue, just like he always wanted, replanted the wildflowers he used to call Barbie's blush. Neighbors thought I was crazy, an old lady fixing up a forgotten house, but I didn't care. This place was full of ghosts, yes, but also full of love. One rainy afternoon, while organizing the bookshelf in the old den, I found something wedged behind the planks. A faded cassette tape, labeled in thick black ink, for Barbie, only if you still remember me. My hands shook. My breath caught in my chest. I didn't own a cassette player anymore, but I had to hear what was on it. The next day, I drove to a thrift store 20 minutes away. Asked the teenage clerk if they had any old tape players. Whoa, vintage, he chuckled. Are you writing a book or something? No, I smiled. Just trying to finish one. He found me an old silver cassette player for $10. Back at the ranch, I sat in the kitchen, alone, the rain tapping softly on the window, and I pressed play. A little static. Then his voice. Thomas. Hey, Barbie. If you're hearing this, well, I guess I'm gone. Or maybe you found this by accident. Or maybe, just maybe, you missed me enough to come back. I covered my mouth. I hadn't heard his voice since the hospice. But this was younger, stronger, before the sickness, before the pain. I know you left, and I don't blame you anymore. Life scares people. Love even more. I don't know if you ever think of me, but I think of you every day. A long pause. Remember that night at the lake? When we danced with no music, just fireflies and frogs croaking like backup singers. I kept thinking, I could die happy right now. My heart broke, because I remembered every second of that night. I guess I made this tape because I couldn't say it all out loud. But I need you to know, even though you left me in the hospital, and even though I woke up alone, I don't regret a thing. Not the kidney, not the pain, not even the heartbreak. Because loving you was still the best thing I ever did. The tape clicked. That was the end. I sat in that kitchen for hours, holding the player to my chest. The gold heart necklace felt warmer, like it knew. The next morning, I called Riverstone Hospice. Is there a way I can leave something for his records? I asked. A letter? A message? Anything. The receptionist paused. We don't usually do that, but Mr. Walker asked for something unusual before he passed. My heart jumped. What did he ask? She pulled something up on her computer. He asked that if you ever return to the ranch, we should tell you there's one last place you need to go. Where? His father's cabin. North Trail. 10 minutes from your ranch. I hadn't been to that trail since 1975. It was hidden behind thick trees, with an old wooden sign barely hanging by a nail. I packed some water, put on Thomas's old flannel shirt I found in a trunk, and hiked up the dirt path. Every step felt like walking through a memory. Pine needles underfoot, birdsong in the distance, and my heart was pounding like it did when I was 26 and in love. The cabin was smaller than I remembered. Roof half caved in, windows broken. But there, nailed to the door, was a note in faded handwriting. Barbie, you made it. Good. Inside, it was quiet, dusty, empty, except for one wooden chair facing the window and a small metal box on the floor. I picked it up. Inside were pictures, photos of us. From fairs, road trips, birthdays, lazy Sundays, He had kept them all. Even the one from the hospital, the day before the transplant. My face is pale, full of worry. On the back of it, he had written, "She's worth it." There was a letter folded beneath the box. Barbie, you don't need to carry guilt anymore. You already paid it, every time you remembered me. I loved you, even when I didn't want to. And I think you loved me too, even when you didn't know how. This cabin, this land, it's yours now. I left the deed in the bureau. Build something here. Not for me. For you. I sobbed. Right there, on the dusty floor of an old cabin surrounded by trees, I cried like a little girl. Because this man I betrayed, still chose to leave me peace. Weeks passed. I started renovating the cabin. Piece by piece. I turned it into a small retreat for women who were hurting, grieving, or healing from regrets just like mine. We called it Thomas's Place. A safe space for second chances. But I'll be honest. Some nights, I still cry myself to sleep. Some wounds never fully close. But I wear his necklace. I keep his tape. And every spring, I sit by the lake where we once danced. And whisper to the wind, "I still choose you too." It's funny how a place that once carried so much pain can become the very place where healing begins. Thomas's Place was no longer just an idea. It had become real. Women came from all over the state, young and old. Some arrived with tear-stained cheeks, others with their hearts packed in silence. They brought stories of betrayal, regret, loneliness, and shame. But they left with something else. Hope. And every time a woman sat on the porch of the cabin, staring out into the pines, I imagined Thomas sitting next to them, still giving his heart to people, still saving lives, even in death. One afternoon, as I was tending to the garden outside the retreat center, a woman tapped me on the shoulder. She was young, maybe 35, long dark hair, pale skin. Her eyes looked like someone who hadn't slept in months. "Are you Barbara Mitchell?" she asked gently. "Yes," I smiled. "That's me." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a letter. "I found this among my father's things. I wasn't sure where to bring it until someone told me about this place." I looked down at the envelope. My name was written in that same old, slanted handwriting I knew by heart. Thomas. My fingers shook as I opened it. "Barbie, if this ever reaches you, it means my daughter found it. Her name is Clara. She's mine. But you were always the reason I believed in love. I never told you about her because I didn't want pity. Her mother left when Clara was 2. I raised her on stories of kindness, and even though I didn't say your name, she knows you. Through every flower I planted, every trail we walked, every time I told her to love boldly, even when it hurts." I looked up at the young woman standing in front of me. Tears were falling down her cheeks. "I'm Clara," she whispered. "I'm his daughter." I gasped. I took a step forward, then wrapped my arms around her as tight as I could. It felt like hugging a missing piece of my soul. We stood there for what felt like hours, 2 women bound by the love of one man. "I never knew," I whispered into her hair. "He never told me." "He wanted to," she said, pulling back. "But he didn't want you to think he was using her to get you back. He respected you, even after everything." We sat on the porch that evening, sipping tea as the sun sank behind the trees. Clara told me stories of growing up with Thomas. How he made pancakes every Sunday, even when they were burnt. How he planted a lily for every year he missed me. How he still carved my name into wooden benches when no one was looking. And then she said something that shattered my heart all over again. "He never married again," she whispered. He told me, some loves don't get replaced. That night, Clara stayed over in the guest room. I couldn't sleep. I walked out to the lake, wearing Thomas's old flannel and the gold heart necklace. The moon reflected on the water like a mirror to the past. And suddenly I saw them. Two fireflies, dancing, twisting through the air just like we did on that lake all those years ago. My lips trembled. I whispered to the darkness, I loved you too, Thomas,
even when I didn't know how.
The next morning, Clara handed me a small wooden box. I found this in the attic after he passed, she said. He labeled it, Barbie's box. I think it's always been meant for you. I opened it carefully. Inside were three things. A cassette tape labeled Second Dance, a small silver key, and a folded piece of paper that read, Play this tape when you're ready. Use the key to open what's hidden beneath the porch swing, but only when you're ready to let go. Love always. T. Later that day, after Clara left, I sat on the same porch swing, the one where we first kissed, first laughed, first dreamed. I looked down at the wooden boards beneath my feet. Something was carved into the bottom rail of the swing. It was faint, nearly gone with time, but I traced it with my fingers. She was always my home. I used the key, lifted the wood plank. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a small metal box. I opened it. Inside, a music box. And a letter. Dear Barbie, I kept this music box for you. You once told me that if we couldn't dance again, you wanted the music to remember. So here it is. Let it play when you miss me. Let it play when you're ready to stop blaming yourself. Let it play when you forgive you. I turned the key of the music box. Soft notes began to ring out. It was our song. The one we danced to on that silent night by the lake, with no music, just love and fireflies. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I could feel his arms around me again. I didn't realize I was dancing until I opened my eyes.
Right there, on the porch of Thomas's old cabin, with that little music box playing our song, I had started to sway.
Slow, gentle, like a breeze moving through old memories. There was no partner, but I wasn't alone, because his love had never really left me. And now, I was finally learning to live with it. That night, I sat by the lake again. It has become my sacred space. The moonlight painted silver lines across the water, and the trees whispered like they remembered our laughter. I brought the cassette player with me, the one I bought for $10 at the thrift store. I pressed play on the second tape, Second Dance. There was static again, and then, his voice. Thomas. Older now. Slower. But still so full of heart. Hey, Barbie. If you've come this far, then maybe there's still more to say. Maybe there's still something left between us, even if it's just the space where forgiveness lives. I hugged the flannel shirt tighter around me. I kept thinking about second chances, and how we all want one, even when we know we don't deserve it. But sometimes, the second dance isn't with someone else. It's with ourselves. It's the dance of finally letting go. I felt tears slide down my cheek. So this is your second dance, Barbie. Take it. And if you ever wonder if I forgave you, just look at the life you've built. Because that forgiveness is in everything you've touched since the moment you walked back into that hospice room. The tape ended with a soft click. But in my heart, something had begun. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do again. I took out my old nursing license. It had expired years ago, but I still remembered how to care, how to heal. And I remembered Thomas's words. Build something here. Not for me. For you. So I did. I expanded Thomas's place. No longer just a quiet retreat, it became a haven for anyone carrying heavy hearts. We added small cabins for long-term guests, a little counseling space in the back, a memory garden with wind chimes and lilies blooming in every corner. And I started writing letters. Not to Thomas, he had heard it all, but to the women who came through my door. Women who'd been left. Women who had left. Women who lived with shame they wore like skin. I wrote, "You are not your worst moment. You are not your biggest mistake. You are still worthy of being loved." One chilly fall evening, while sipping tea on the porch, a woman named Nancy joined me. She was 63. Red curls. Tough as nails. But I could see the pain behind her eyes. She said nothing for a while. Just rocked in the swing. Then she turned to me and said, "I cheated on my husband after he beat cancer. I ruined everything. But I still miss him." I didn't say anything at first. I just reached over and took her hand
and said, "Then you came to the right place."
The weeks passed, then months, then years, and I began to understand something I never could when I was younger. Forgiveness isn't a gift you ask for. It's a choice you become, a choice you give to others, by learning how to give it to yourself first. Then, one spring morning, Clara returned. She looked different now, stronger, softer. She brought with her a little boy. "His name's Thomas," she smiled. "I wanted him to see where his granddad built something with love." She bent down and whispered to him, "This is Miss Barbara. She's the reason we're all here." He looked up at me with big blue eyes, just like his grandfather's. "Hi," he said, smiling wide. "You have flowers in your hair." I touched my head and laughed. I hadn't even noticed the lily petal stuck in my braid. "Well, young man," I said, smiling back, "that means I'm doing something right." Later that day, Clara and I sat by the fire pit. She looked at me and said, "He really did love you."
"Until the very end."
I nodded, my eyes on the flames. "And I'll love him, even after mine." Before she left, Clara placed something on the cabin porch. It was a wooden sign, painted in her father's handwriting. It read, "Thomas's Place, for the broken, the brave, and the beloved." I wept, because after all these years, after all the shame and sorrow, this old heart of mine had found something I never thought possible again, peace. But just when I thought the past had finally been put to rest, something unexpected happened. A man arrived at the gates of Thomas's place, late 40s, tan coat, ball cap,
clean-shaven with a strange look in his eye.
He asked for me by name.
"Barbara Mitchell," he said, holding up an envelope.
I nodded, my hands suddenly cold. He handed me the letter. "I was asked to deliver this to you."
He told me to wait until 7 years after his passing.
I stared at the seal. I knew that handwriting. Thomas. Inside the envelope was just one line. "There's still one more secret I never told you." I stood there on the porch, staring at the letter in my hands. "There's still one more secret I never told you." The ink was faded, but the words felt fresh, like he had just written them. The envelope was old, sealed carefully, but something about it made my fingers tremble. Thomas had been gone for 7 years. Why now? Why this? I sat down at the edge of the porch swing, the same one I had repaired myself, and slowly peeled the seal open. Inside was another letter, longer this time, but it wasn't addressed to me alone.
"To Barbara and Clara, if she ever finds her way to this place.
You both deserve the truth." My heart skipped a beat. I looked around. Clara wasn't there. She had taken little Thomas back to town that morning. But something told me this truth wasn't just meant to be read, it was meant to be felt. So I began. There are things a man takes to his grave, but some he leaves behind because someone deserves to breathe easier. Barbara, when I gave you my kidney, I never told you the full story. The doctors said it would be risky for me, that I might lose more than a few weeks of work. What I didn't tell you was, I had already started getting sick before the transplant. Early signs. My own kidneys were under pressure, but I told them to shut up about it, because if you didn't get help, you were going to die. I gasped.
Tears welled up in my eyes again.
I told myself that if I lost 10 years off my life for saving you, it would be worth it. And you know what?
I still believe that.
But here's the secret I never had the heart to tell you.
You weren't the only one I saved.
My eyes scanned the page faster now. Clara isn't just my daughter.
She's our daughter.
I froze. My mind went blank. What? It was right before your collapse. Right before the diagnosis. You told me you didn't feel right. Tired. Dizzy. I asked if you were pregnant. You laughed. Said it wasn't possible yet. But I always wondered. When you disappeared, when you married James, I assumed you moved on. Until I saw Clara's photo. She was 6. And she looked just like you. And me. I knew. I confronted James once. Quietly. Just the two of us in a parking lot. He told me I was delusional.
But he wouldn't look me in the eye.
So I stayed quiet. I didn't want to cause trouble. I didn't want Clara to grow up confused. But I watched. From a distance. Her school concerts. Her graduation. Her first piano recital. I was there, Barbara.
Just hidden in the crowd.
I dropped the letter onto my lap, my breath frozen. Clara. My Clara. Our Clara. The memories came rushing back like a tidal wave. The timing. The nausea. The dizzy spells. I'd blamed the stress. The exhaustion. But I had missed my period. And I never thought to test because I was so focused on surviving kidney failure. I thought I couldn't be pregnant. That it wasn't possible. And when I married James, I assumed the baby I carried was his. But she never looked like him. She had Thomas's eyes, his voice, his patience. I covered my mouth. Oh my God. The letter continued. I left Clara with the truth hidden inside her blood. If she ever takes a test, she'll know. And when she does, I hope she understands I didn't stay away because I didn't love her. I stayed away because I loved her too much to break her world apart. And Barbie. That's why I built Thomas's place. Not just for the broken, but for her. So one day, when the world got too heavy for her, she'd have a place to come back to meet you,
and maybe to meet herself.
I sat in silence, completely still. The world around me faded. Even the birds quieted, as if they too were absorbing the truth. Clara wasn't just a visitor. She was my daughter, my only child, a secret Thomas carried until his death, not out of bitterness, but out of protection. I rushed inside, grabbed the old scrapbook where I had tucked every photo of Clara since she first arrived at the retreat. Every smile, every moment she spent in the garden, every time she hugged me like I was already family. Because deep down, maybe she knew. I waited for her to return. 3 days. Then 5. Then finally, she pulled up the gravel path in her blue SUV with little Thomas in the back seat. I met her by the porch swing. She stepped out, confused by the look on my face. I need to talk to you, I said, my voice trembling. Okay, she said slowly. Is everything all right? I handed her the letter, the one Thomas had written. She opened it and read quietly. Her hands were shaking. Her knees buckled halfway through. I caught her, held her close, and for the first time in my life, I whispered the words I never thought I'd be able to say. I'm your mother. She collapsed into my arms and cried like the little girl I never got to raise. That night, we sat by the lake. 3 generations. Clara, her son, and me. We said nothing, just listened to the breeze, watched the fireflies, and knew that even though time had stolen years from us, love brought them back. I still remember how her hands clung to my blouse. Clara didn't let go for a long time. We sat on that old porch swing, rocking slowly, tears soaking our cheeks. Not a single word passed between us for nearly an hour. There was nothing to say. Everything we ever needed to know was already there. In our blood, in our eyes, in our hearts. Later that night, we sat at the kitchen table. She held the letter from Thomas in both hands, like it was the last piece of him she'd ever touch. Her little boy, Thomas Jr., slept upstairs, curled up in the same bedroom where his grandfather once rested after long days of building fences and dreaming out loud. Clara looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Why didn't you tell me? I shook my head gently. I didn't know. And I meant it. I thought I was just sick. I never imagined I was pregnant. By the time I realized I'd missed something, I was already married to James. He never questioned it. I never questioned it. She nodded slowly, then said something I'll never forget. I always felt different, like I didn't belong to him. I blinked. Did he ever hurt you? No, she said softly. But he didn't love me. Not the way a father should. He raised me out of duty, not warmth. Her voice cracked. But I remember seeing this man, once at my piano recital. He stood at the back. Didn't clap. Didn't smile. Just watched. I thought maybe he was a friend of the principal. But now I know. Her lips quivered. That was him, wasn't it? I nodded, tears falling again. Yes, that was Thomas. We stayed up all night talking. We looked through every picture, every journal entry, every letter he left behind. He had been leaving a trail for her. For us. A quiet trail of love. Hoping one day we'd follow it, all the way home. Over the next few weeks, Clara and I became inseparable. She started visiting more often, sometimes for days at a time. We laughed like sisters. We cried like mother and daughter. We healed like people who finally knew where they belonged. One afternoon, I handed her something I'd been too scared to open for years. Thomas's old flannel shirt, the one I wore after his funeral. This is yours, I said, placing it in her arms. She held it to her face and sobbed. He wore this when he built my first toy box, she whispered. I remember the smell. I thought I imagined it. You didn't, I said. We hosted a small memorial service that spring. Just me, Clara, and a few women from Thomas's place who had become like family. We planted a tree by the lake. A white magnolia. Strong. Beautiful. Rooted. Clara placed the music box beneath it, wrapped in silk. I want his song to live here forever, she said. And as we covered the box with soil, a wind blew gently through the trees. The chimes on the porch sang, and for a second it felt like he was there, smiling, at peace. A few days later, Clara made a decision that took my breath away. I want to move here, she said, with Thomas. I want him to grow up knowing this place, this love, this truth. I couldn't stop the tears. You'd really do that? She smiled. I already feel like I've been here my whole life. That summer, I gave her the keys to the cabin, the same one Thomas built with his bare hands. She repainted it, hung curtains, baked cookies that reminded me of childhood. She made it hers, and watching her thrive felt like watching a garden bloom in the ashes of a wildfire. One day, while cleaning out the back shed, Clara found something wedged beneath the floorboards. A dusty wooden box with initials carved on top, T+B. Inside, a ring. Simple. Gold. Worn with age. I gasped. It was the engagement ring. The one Thomas gave me all those years ago when he asked me to be his wife by the lake.
I thought this was gone, I whispered.
Clara held it out. I think you should wear it again. I shook my head.
I don't need a ring to remember.
She smiled.
Then wear it to honor him.
So I did. Later that week, I found an envelope tucked inside the ring box. A final note. Barbie, if you find this, then maybe love really does come full circle. I never asked for much, just your heart, and even when I lost it, I never stopped hoping it would come back. If you're holding this ring, then maybe, just maybe, it did. That night, I walked to the lake, held the ring up to the stars, and whispered, "You have my heart, Thomas. Always did. Always will." 1 month later, Clara got a call. She'd applied to take over operations at Thomas's place, fully, officially, to turn it into a registered nonprofit that could reach women across the country. They approved it, in full, and they asked her to name it. She didn't hesitate. Barbie and Thomas Foundation, a place for forgiveness. Now, women fly in from states away. They write letters, share stories, cry on the same porch I once broke down on, and I sit by the window, watching them grow stronger, watching Clara help them, watching little Thomas Jr. chase butterflies in the fields. Sometimes I wonder how one decision, one mistake, one broken moment, can ripple through decades. But now I know. It's not the mistake that defines you. It's what you do after. It's whether you run from it, or rise from it. But just when everything felt settled, just when the chapters felt closed, Clara came to me with a look I hadn't seen before. "Mom," she said softly, "there's someone here asking questions about Thomas." "Who?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "He says he's your grandson."
A grandson.
I blinked slowly, as if the words hadn't quite landed. Clara nodded. "He's waiting at the gate. He said his name is Matthew. Said his mother was Melissa Walker." I nearly dropped the mug in my hand. Melissa Walker. That name hit me like a stone, because Melissa Walker had been Thomas's old childhood friend. I remembered her vaguely from decades ago, always with her hair tied up in a ribbon, eyes following Thomas like a secret no one spoke aloud. "I didn't know they had a child," I whispered. Clara nodded again, slowly. "He didn't either. Not until later in life, apparently. She passed away a few years ago from cancer. Her son, Matthew, only recently found out Thomas was his father." My heart thumped painfully in my chest. Thomas had a son? And now that son was at my door? I walked out slowly toward the white gravel path that led up to the entrance of Thomas's place. There he stood. Young. Maybe 30. Lean. Tall. Same crooked smile. Same eyes. Thomas's eyes. When he saw me, he straightened his back. "Are you Barbara?" he asked gently. I nodded, unable to speak. "I'm Matthew," he said, voice soft. "Thomas Walker was my father." We sat on the porch together. Me, Clara, and Matthew. A triangle of history. grief, and new beginnings. He told us everything. Melissa and Thomas had met briefly in the mid-1980s. It wasn't a romance, it was a moment. A lonely weekend. A place to rest a wounded heart. Melissa never told him she was pregnant. By the time Matthew was old enough to ask about his father, she just said, "He was a good man." But we lost touch. After she died, Matthew found a box in her closet filled with old letters. One had a return address. Thomas Walker, Vermont. That brought him here. "Did he ever talk about me?" Matthew asked, hopeful but scared. I smiled gently. No. But not because he didn't care. Thomas didn't speak much, but everything he did out of love. Matthew nodded. I figured. When I read the letters she never sent, I knew he must have been someone special. And I needed to meet the people who knew him. He paused, eyes scanning the cabin. This place, it feels like him. That night, we all sat by the lake. Same bench, same stars, same story, told again through new eyes. I handed Matthew one of the letters Thomas had left behind. The one where he wrote, "Some people carry love in their blood and never even know it." Matthew read it twice, then placed it carefully in his jacket. "This means everything to me," he said. In the days that followed, Matthew stayed to help Clara with her non-profit expansion. He turned out to be an architect, good with his hands, just like his father. He offered to build 3 new cabins and restore the greenhouse. But more than that, he built bridges. Between generations, between wounds, between the past and the future. One afternoon, I walked into the garden and saw something that nearly took my breath away. Little Thomas Jr. was sitting on Matthew's lap. They were planting lilies. "I'm teaching him how to plant memories," Matthew said with a wink. I wiped away a tear, because right then I knew Thomas Walker had not just saved my life with a kidney. He had created a legacy, a family, a home. That summer, we held a memorial, a true one, for Thomas. We invited every woman who had ever passed through the cabin doors. Hundreds came. Many brought flowers. Some brought journals they had written while here. And all of us stood by the lake, watching the sunset, as Clara read aloud the words carved into the wooden plaque by the tree. He chose her. She came back. And together, they gave the world a second chance. As the ceremony ended, I stood up, held the gold locket in my palm, and opened it one last time. Inside was our old photo. Me and Thomas, laughing, young, unbroken. I kissed the photo, then held it out over the lake, and let it fall, softly, peacefully, into the water. Because some love doesn't have to be held onto forever. Some love just needs to be released. I am 80 years old. I loved it. I have broken. I have been betrayed. I have begged for forgiveness. And I have finally forgiven myself. Every day now, I wake up to a place full of life. Clara cooks breakfast. Matthew teaches Thomas Jr. how to fix fences. And I sit on the porch swaying to the rhythm of redemption. This isn't the life I thought I would have, but it's the life I was saved for. And I finally understand something. Thomas didn't just give me a kidney. He gave me a new heartbeat, one that still echoes in every corner of this place, one that still says, even in your deepest shame, you are still worthy of love.